Thank you for spending some time with us here on Retiring Well. We've prepared a great show for you this week to be helpful so you can plan to retire well. Starting us off right away, we're going to be talking about things to do before you retire. Some things right before and some things looking a little bit longer term out there. Then, what are 3 strategies to help fight inflation? For the last couple of years, all families have kind of been feeling the squeeze with inflation. What are some things that can help you along the way? Are you thinking of retiring overseas? A little bit of a growing trend here. We're retiring abroad. What does that look like? What are some things that you need to be doing with your portfolio and financial situations to make that as best move or easiest move as possible? And to wrap up the show, we're going to throw a little bit of information about the upcoming presidential election and how the different candidates could affect your portfolio. All of this and so much more coming up right here, right now on Retiring Well.
Retiring Well, brought to you by Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial advisors specializing in retirement planning and serving all of Northern Michigan. Retiring Well, helping you plan for a successful and comfortable retirement. Retiring Well, plan to retire well.
You've done it. You've made the decision to retire. You worked your whole life to get to this point, and now that time has come. You got a date picked, and it's marked on the calendar, and the countdown has begun. What are some of the things we need to do before that day comes around? Some of these here I'm going to talk about at the beginning are more short-term in nature, and some of them are looking out a little bit longer. But the short-term things is be clear about when your benefits stop at work. As an example, when do you get your last paycheck? Is there vacation time or unused sick time coming out? How is that paid to you? Is there withholdings from that are appropriate? Is there contributions made into your retirement plan from that? And when is the last direct deposit going to hit that bank account of yours so you have those income sources coming in? When are health insurance going to expire if you're getting health insurance from your employer? Are they going to stop the day you retire? Are they going to continue through the end of the month? Or do you have some other arrangement set up through your retirement or through some COBRA policy or something like that to see when that comes into place? This can be vitally important when you think of health insurance, depending upon when you retire in your plan year as well. If you're somebody that uses health insurance often and you've kind of used up or met your deductible, and so now your expenses are being covered in full or mainly in full in many cases versus paying into a deductible, maybe there's a reason you should be seeking to wrap up maybe some things that you have or getting those checkups or appointments taken care of before you come off of that policy. So also, what are some expenses you have coming short term? Is there anything bigger coming up? Maybe your property taxes are due, some large home expense that you have that's coming up. Maybe you need a new vehicle, a big trip you've been planning to celebrate your retirement, something like that. Is there any big expense coming up that you need to financially plan for between as this income is slowing down or stopping and then whatever your retirement income is picking up? With that said, is this expense going to incur financing? Is there some sort of financing need that you're going to have, whether it's financing a vehicle, financing a purchase of a second home or something like that? Sometimes from a qualification standpoint, it looks a little easier in some circumstances or looks a little better on paper if you have income coming in versus being retired. So applying for financing while you're still employed versus being retired potentially could be beneficial in that situation. Then, now looking a little bit more long-term in nature. So remember, I earlier just talked about kind of when that paycheck stops. So when does your retirement income start, right? When does Social Security start if you're electing to take that at retirement? When does, how long is it going to take to set up an income stream from like your 401k or your IRA? When are those payments going to start? If you're fortunate enough to have a pension, when is that first pension payment going to hit and how is it being deposited in your account and what sources and all that sort of stuff? Maybe you have some annuity that was set up before, or you've purchased some sort of income annuity. When do those payments start? Are they deferred, or when are they going to be paying out to you as the account owner and stuff like that? So again, one income source probably is coming to an end, your employment, right? And what is going to pick up from that perspective? And then since we're talking about money coming in, what's going out? What does that retirement budget look like? What is that day-to-day expense that you've mapped out, hopefully, of what that is? Obviously, household bills and expenses and stuff like that, but some of these may be hobbies that you haven't had the time for now that you look to hope to do more. Maybe it's traveling or something like that. Again, mapping out that budget is vitally important so you understand, again, how this looks. Now, hopefully, you've done many of these things well in advance so you're not rushing at the end of doing this. But making sure you have these pieces here so that transition in retirement goes as smooth as possible. Depending upon what your age is, where you're retired, is going to play a role in some of this, right? Obviously, if you're not old enough yet to collect Social Security, you're not going to take it. Now, also, depending upon when your retirement age is, you got to be careful because some certain accounts don't allow for distributions prior to certain ages, or there's penalties or early distributions. As an example, IRAs, 59 and a half, right? So if you take funds out of an IRA, prior to 59 and a half, you're going to pay a 10% early distribution penalty. If it's from that 401k you're retiring from, it's only 55. You know, some 457 plans, it can be even sooner than that. So again, knowing these rules, matching them up with what your retirement plan looks like is so important. So take the time, sit down with a qualified financial advisor and map this out so your retirement can be as smooth as possible and you can plan to retire well.
Every success story starts with a plan. If you are nearing retirement or already retired, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. Our presentation will address pressing questions such as, how will the presidential election impact my investments? What can I do to protect against inflation in retirement? Am I tax diversified? How can I maximize my Social Security benefits? Will my assets be properly protected when I pass away? And much more. Call 888-608-5825 or register online and choose the date and location that works best for you. The live event starts at 6:30 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow. But seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 or register online to reserve your seats today. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well.
Finding a reputable business shouldn't require luck or chance. But how can you tell who you can trust? Pro tip: the BBB connects people with businesses they can trust. So think of the BBB as the better. Check with the BBB first, because better businesses are honest and commit to high ethical standards bureau. That's why they're better. Always look for the sign of a better business and find a better business anytime at bbb.org.
Hey, welcome to this segment on 3 broad strategies that you can take in order to fight inflation. So I learned a long time ago in personal finance, you basically have 3 options. Your first option is you can spend more than you make. Okay, not ideal, but in America, you can borrow your way to spending more than you make. Option 2, you can spend all that you make. Or option 3, you can spend less than you make, and then you create margin over time. Well, what has inflation done to so many households across the nation here? They've really pushed us towards what that first option looks like, that the cost of goods and the cost of living has just risen so drastically that now people are spending more than they make. And so let's figure out a way to maybe fight against that. First step, okay, know your numbers. Here's a really broad way to calculate your numbers. And it is going to take a little bit of homework and a little bit of work, but I think it's worth it, okay? So when you know your numbers, then we can identify what to do with some of those numbers. So the first thing is, let's just calculate annual income, annual gross income. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna calculate total gross Social Security, if applicable, pensions, maybe you have a job, and then taxable distributions might be from IRAs or 401ks, and then the non-taxable distributions that potentially could be from a savings account, maybe it's a brokerage account or even a Roth IRA. So we get our total income. Then what we want to do is classify what does our spending plan look like. So let's start with the taxes. Identify how much do you pay in taxes. And if you want, you can take that number, divide it by your total income, and get a percentage. So you can see a dollar amount and a percentage. Sometimes it's nice to look at it from both perspectives. Then we can look at our giving, okay? So pick a percent maybe and say, oh, I'm gonna give 10%, or I wanna give 1%, or I wanna give no percent. It's identify a giving line. Then look at what your savings might be, okay? So why you might wanna save, the emergency funds, the future roof, the future car, those kind of big ticket items that you'll eventually have. And then what we have to do is classify our costs down into what we need to live. This is going to be food, shelter, transportation, those fixed costs, energy for your house, so forth. And then what costs are just wants. Okay, so these might be vacations, adventures, lifestyle things. And so then you can line itemize both of those. And again, you can extend that percentage divided by your total income to get how much you might be wanting to spend on an annual basis. At the end, after you take your total income minus your total spending, you're going to get a cash flow number. Could be positive, could be negative. Okay, so that's step one, know your numbers. Step two, we want to analyze your retirement plan, your income plan. So we'll just go back through the same exact steps, okay? And we'll say, all right, have I taken Social Security? Are there any other Social Security options that I might be able to utilize to grow that income? Maybe you have a pension or you have a lump sum pension option. We should look at that. Maybe there's a job, you say, yeah, but Jack, I'm retired, I don't want to go back to work. Well, maybe there's a part-time job, where you can use your life experiences to have a part-time mission that's the perfect balance. That could grow your income a little bit. Then you can look at your taxable distributions and your non-taxable distributions. And that's where having a long-term tax plan is so crucial. Because when you get down to your spending, if you can figure out your tax optimization strategy, well, you're going to save on taxes, and that's going to help you have a little bit more money at the end of the day, and then that'll help you fight inflation as these costs rise. You could look at your giving, okay? So if you're saying you might be eligible for a qualified charitable distribution or a donor-advised fund. It's tax-efficient ways to give. You might look at your needs and say, hey, how could I be a little bit savvier as a shopper? What could I do to maybe buy in bulk or use substitutes? What would it look like to just try to spend a little bit more time on those purchases that are required, those fixed costs? And then you go down to your wants, and then you say, when do you want those wants to happen? Okay, and then identify which ones might need to be pushed out and which ones need to stay. Okay, and then the last step three, you need to calculate how much risk can you take. So the acronym for risk, your capacity, your attitude towards risk, and your need for risk. The last one's the most important. And so to figure out that need for risk, what you can do is take your total withdrawals, distributions, divided by your total portfolio, and that will give you a percentage. And that percentage, that withdrawal rate will tell you how much risk you really need. And if you need help, that's why we're here. We love to teach. We love to give this stuff away to you so that you can start doing some math problems. But they get complicated pretty quickly. And so if you're sitting there and you're thinking, hey, let's just start one time, no obligation, free consultation to just go through what my plan looks like, please give Centennial Wealth Advisory a call. Have a great day.
Every success story starts with a plan. The success of your retirement depends on a solid financial plan. If you are nearing retirement or already retired, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. There is no cost and no obligation, and dinner is on us. We are Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial professionals, specializing in retirement planning and serving all of northern Michigan, with offices in Traverse City, Gaylord, Petoskey, and Cadillac. Our presentation will address pressing questions such as, how will the presidential election impact my investments? What can I do to protect against inflation in retirement? Am I tax diversified? How can I maximize my Social Security benefits? Will my assets be properly protected when I pass away? And much more. Call 888-608-5825 or register online and choose the date and location that works best for you. Tuesday, October 22nd at Boone's Long Lake Inn in Traverse City. Tuesday, October 22nd at Kirkland Community College. Wednesday, October 23rd at Bluefish Kitchen and Bar in Manistee. Thursday, October 24th at Boyne Mountain Grand Lodge in Boyne Falls. Tuesday, October 29th at Blue Cow Cafe in Big Rapids. Or Wednesday, October 30th at Boone's Long Lake Inn in Traverse City. The live event starts at 6:30 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow. But seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 or register online to reserve your seats today. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well.
Retiring in that fishing village in Portugal or that vineyard in Tuscany might be a dream come true for your retirement. However, if we don't pay attention to the treaties, the different tax codes, different residency rules, it might be a disaster in the making. What we have to start to think about is each country, if we plan to retire overseas, has very specific tax treaties. They have different rules depending on assets, depending on wealth, all these different variables that we need to be thinking about. A lot more often now when I'm talking with clients is we're having conversations around potentially retiring overseas, whether that's to Canada, Mexico, Europe, and we need to be aware that there's very specific rules that we have to follow so that we can be prepared for retirement. One of the first things we want to be thinking about is tax planning. So when you think about residency in different countries, keep in mind you're going to have to follow a completely different tax code. That's something to be aware of when we're planning around retirement. They may not honor the tax code of the investment assets we have here. We need to be paying attention to how they're going to tax certain investments in that area. What you also have to be thinking about is residency. You know, a lot of clients that we'll talk to, if they plan to retire overseas, they may renounce their U.S. residency. Now, that might be great to qualify for those benefits in that new country, but keep in mind what that may do to assets in the United States, specifically real estate assets. You may no longer qualify specific tax exclusions on real estate properties. That's something we have to be planning around and build into our overall retirement plan. An example of this could be like a Roth IRA. So being in Michigan, we share a border with Canada. I've had lots of clients over the years that have moved back to Canada to be with family. If you have a Roth IRA, remember the benefit of that is tax-free growth, tax-free distribution, and tax-free to heirs. However, if we go to Canada, they don't necessarily honor a Roth IRA. They're going to treat that as a pension. And you have an option though, when you move to Canada, you can make a one-time election to get that same tax-free deferral in that account. But because they don't honor Roth IRA, you have to make sure you also stop contributions. If you do not make that one-time contribution, one-time election, and stop contributions, you're going to end up taking this tax-free asset and making it taxable. So you need to be aware of the different tax rules in that host country and make sure you're adapting that into your overall retirement plan. The next thing you want to do is think about maintaining access to the United States financial system. There's a host of reasons for that, main one being having access to your retirement accounts, but a lot of banks and brokerage facilities do not work with you if you don't have a US-based address. So if you don't make adjustments to your banks or your portfolio moving from, say, Schwab to Vanguard, well, that could cause the accounts to be liquidated, which could have a pretty significant tax impact to you. So be aware if you're working with certain institutions, if they'll work with you in this new host country. A lot of the conversations we're having with clients that are looking to retire and move away from the United States is really focused on healthcare. Well, with healthcare, just because you move to that country doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fall under the universal healthcare program there. There's going to be some sort of timeline you have to be aware of to be able to qualify for those benefits. So you want to work with Social Security and Medicare to make sure that there's no lapse in coverage while you're working through that program. So that might mean maintaining U.S. residency for a little bit longer than you intended to make sure that there's no gaps in health coverage. Or if you're fully going to go to that country, renounce U.S. citizenship, be aware of how you can get some sort of health insurance plan still in place while you go through that qualifying of benefits. A common one that's often overlooked is currency fluctuations. So that can be both a double-edged sword. That can work in our favor and against us. It can either increase our purchasing power or decrease our purchasing power. Building into your portfolio some sort of stress test to know if your assets can fluctuate with pretty significant changes in currency is a huge part of retiring overseas that oftentimes gets overlooked, and we really need to be aware of that. The last piece is estate planning. You know, a major part of our retirement plan is estate planning. We talk about it a lot and with our clients, we talk a lot about it on the show. Just because you have documents prepared in the United States does not mean those documents are going to work in this new country. They might have a completely different set of estate planning rules that may not work with the current trust you have in place here. Example, if you're using life insurance to avoid estate tax. Well, in some countries, life insurance is a taxable versus a tax-free asset. You need to be aware of updating those documents to work with this new country. The key here is we're seeing a lot more clients moving in that direction. We need to be proactive in our planning approach today to minimize the surprises long term and start to move our assets around and prepare different documents to make sure there's no surprises in retirement once we get to that new country. Now, if you do end up in that village in Portugal or Tuscany, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to meet with you there.
If you're retired or approaching retirement in the next 5 to 10 years, join us for an informative live event. This event is all about you, the challenges you face, and the information you need to help you build the future that you want. There's no pressure to become a client. Our goal is to simply give you valuable information that you can use to make smarter financial decisions. We hope that by the time you leave this event, you'll be one step closer to your retirement goals.
57% of employees say that finances are the top cause of stress in their lives. This is one of many findings from a PwC survey. Human resources managers and business owners, we will partner with you to help your employees. At Centennial Wealth Advisory, we focus on education and the health of the whole person. We offer a complimentary financial wellness workshop with food provided for your team. We all want our employees to be productive at work, but most importantly, we want them to flourish in every area of their life.
Living life isn't always easy. It puts up challenges and obstacles you'll have to overcome. There are responsibilities. You put in effort to provide and take care of your family, to save and invest, to balance work and life. Planning is the first step to succeeding. Plan to retire well.
So I'm coming up here on 20 years with Centennial Wealth Advisory, and I would say that the presidential election time is unique. Emotions are typically running high, and ultimately people are sometimes reacting to the markets based on their emotions. Now, the market may not really care about what your emotions are or what who's up for election and everything. And so I want to say as we have these conversations, we'll sit down with clients and as the conversation may go along, they might say, well, if so-and-so wins, well, I'm going to put all my money in cash. I'm going to bury it in the backyard, that type of thinking. But the stock market doesn't necessarily react the same way. And as we've learned over time, you'll hear it time and time again about how market timing is simply an impossible feat and really isn't an advisable idea when you're looking at long-term investing. So let's start by talking about that first year of a 4-year presidential term. As you'll see on this bar chart, it goes back to 1977, and 3 of the 12 were negative, with the worst return being negative 11.9% in the first year. So ultimately, 75% of the time, there's been positive growth in the S&P 500 going back nearly 50 years. The Democratic presidents have experienced an average of over 20% in that first year. Meanwhile, Republicans over 12% is what they've seen. So now let's go and take a step further back and go back and start with the Great Depression and look at 4-year election cycles. With this, you'll notice 67 of the 92 years, or ultimately 73% of the time, the S&P 500 has been positive. The average 4-year return was over 46%. That's pretty impressive when you look at a 4-year time frame, and that type of return is again double digits when you look at that over a longer term. And then the averages in the first year are a little under 10%, second year about 8.5%, third year over 17.5%, and on the fourth year of a presidential cycle, over 10% on the average. So again, there's no major figures standing out saying, well, the first year is the worst and it's always negative. Sometimes we have a tendency to let our emotions control how we're looking at the investment world and what we may think is going to happen to the market versus some of the statistics. And then lastly, let's take a look at the growth of $10,000 in the S&P 500 going back to 1949. So as you see that visual there, the red line shows you if you only invested during Republican presidencies. And then meanwhile, as you can imagine, the blue line represents those times if you only invested during Democratic presidents. And then both of those lines, you'll notice on your $10,000 since 1949 would have grown to a little under $500,000. Meanwhile, if you just said, well, I'm going to leave my money invested the whole time, regardless of who's in office, and see what that $10,000 does. So as you can see, that $10,000, the black line, grew to over $3.5 million since 1949. So again, circling back to market timing and trying to determine, well, if this person becomes president or that person, and that's going to determine how I respond to the stock market, may not be the best long-term investment strategy. With all that being said, though, want to be respectful of your comfort level when it comes to risk. It's a good time to revisit how your portfolio is structured and get a better understanding of, okay, what risks am I taking? What if the market does take a major hit? What will my stocks and bonds and other investment accounts, what will that look like? Here at Centennial Wealth Advisory, we have the tools to be able to analyze your portfolio and give you a rough estimate of, okay, if the market does this and drops X percent, here's approximately what you'd experience, and see if that's of comfort to you. So if you'd like a no cost, no obligation second opinion, you're welcome to give us a call.